Welcome back to Turning Hard Times into Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, and I'm really happy to have with me once again Professor Laurence Kotlikoff. Dr. Kotlikoff is a professor of economics at Boston University. He's a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and the Economic Society. That's a research associate of the National Bureau of Economic Research and president of Economic Security Planning, Inc. It's a company specializing in financial planning software. And he's the director of the Tax Analysis Center. And Professor Kotlikoff has a very impressive academic background, having received his bachelor's degree from University of Pennsylvania, his doctorate from Harvard University, and he served on the faculties of economics, University of California, Yale University, and is also a consultant to the IMF, the World Bank, the Harvard Institute for International Development, as well as several other organizations. So we're very pleased to have Dr. Kotlikoff with us. Thank you for joining us again.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Just always good to talk to you, and I might suggest to our listeners Kotlikoff.net, I guess, is a place they should go to follow up on your work, right? And you have you've written so many things. There's a list of things that you've written there on your website, and I noticed some of your new posts, which are really interesting, where critics of the tax reform go wrong. Another article, the surprisingly good Republican tax plan, Lawrence Summers' hatchet jobs on tax reform, and Kevin Hassett. So lots of things to talk to you about, but I'd like to have you talk about, I want you to talk about what individuals can do to protect themselves, to enhance their wealth in retirement, and I suppose the earlier people start, the better. I also want to talk to you about an interview that you recently did with Sprott that caught my eye, because it had you suggesting that America is in worse financial condition than Russia and China, and for that matter, compared to most advanced economies in the world. And I want you to delve into that and related issues, but perhaps we talk first about your software called Maxify, which looks very interesting and very reasonably priced. I haven't purchased it myself, but I'm very tempted to do so. I should have before we came on the show so I could talk more intelligently about it or ask you more intelligent questions, but I think it's pretty straightforward. Tell our listeners about Maxify and what it's intended to do.
We market it for $99 at maxifyplanner.com. So it's Maxify, as in Maxi, your finances, Maxify Planner. What it does is it figures out a game plan for you so that you can keep having a spending at a smooth level through time. It figures out how much you can spend every year in today's dollars so that you can keep on spending it so that everybody has the same living standard in your household through time. So it takes into account, the fact that kids are leaving the household and that, somebody might die if they're much older spouse, for example, before the other spouse. It takes into account economies of shared living, all the taxes in all the states and the federal government, Medicare Part B premium. It's very comprehensive, but we've been working on it for like 34 years, like I said, about 24 years to get it right. It's extremely user-friendly. It's web-based. It kind of runs like TurboTax. And it says, look, just tell us what you've got. We don't care what you spent on toothpaste or vacations last year, last 5 years. It's not relevant. You're spending the wrong amount for sure because it's too complicated for anybody to figure out. This program will figure it out using modern economics, computer algorithms, and we're going to show you, here's what you get to spend every year so that you can have the same living standard. It takes into account your cash constraints because not everybody can have a perfectly smooth path if they're paying off a mortgage or college debt or tuition for their kids. But then it figures out automatically on its own how to raise that living standard for you. It does robo-optimization. So in the world of finance, we talk about something called smart beta, which is how to kind of be clever about finding assets that are risky but are going to produce a higher return without too much additional risk because they're kind of if the market goes down, these other assets do better. Kind of they're negatively correlated. But there's something that's even better, which is called Smart Alpha, which is finding safe ways, perfectly safe ways to raise your living standards. So an example here is maximizing your Social Security benefits, finding in our software, Maxify Planner, as part of its optimization, figures out an entire game plan for how you should deal with Social Security. It also, and that's going to raise your lifetime Social Security benefits. It figures out how to lower your lifetime taxes by optimizing over when to take your retirement account money out, whether to annuitize it, whether to contribute more, whether to use take your Roth money out first or second. All these are major issues. Mm-hmm. You can also use the software to figure out whether you want to downsize your home and by how much. When you should, when do you can you really afford to retire? Should you move to Texas and lower your state income taxes if you live in Massachusetts, for example? Mm-hmm. Should you take a job that's in a different state where there's different taxes, different housing costs, different salary, different 401k versus this job? You can do a side-by-side comparison and see which one's going to produce a higher living standard. Mm-hmm. That's how you decide whether or not to move. So, and this stuff can mean on a lifetime basis. I've been able to use our software to almost double somebody's living standard perfectly safely. And this sounds like hype. It sounds like I'm selling some form of snake oil.
Yeah, it does.
I'm a professor of yeah, it does. I know. But I'm a professor of economics, and I'm the CEO or whatever, president of this small company, and I'm one of the few presidents of any company in this country that doesn't get paid a penny from his company. I don't earn a penny and haven't for 24 years from my company because I just run it as a nonprofit. I try and keep the prices for our software as low as possible. Mm-hmm. We don't have any conflicts of interest with any financial industry and company, and we don't try and sell anybody products or recommend any advisors. So I can say this as if I'm hawking a charity, because from my perspective, that's what it is. I'm trying just to help people and hire Americans. So this is really Maxify Planner is in effect a money machine, a safe money machine, and I hope that everybody plunks down the $99 and raises their living standard, because they're going to make much more money running this than the $99.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting. I mean, so I guess it will allow you to make choices to optimize if you want to optimize your income or your living standards. But living standards sometimes are sort of intangible. For example, you mentioned Texas. Mrs. Taylor and I live in New York City. We love New York City. We love the arts. We love all the things that New York City has to offer. The intellectual things that are available here that would be maybe missing in some more rural areas of the country. So I guess, it's still the choice is yours. We could certainly sell our home here in New York City and go buy something, for a third the price that is bigger or better or whatever. But do we want to do that? So I guess there's going to always be those personal decisions.
Yeah. Those decisions are always going to be personal, but the software can help you price out those decisions. You might say, well, look, if my living standard could be twice as high on all the dimensions apart from the pleasantries of living in New York City, if it could be high, more than twice as high, I'm going to move.
Yeah.
If it's going to be only a third higher, it's not worth it to us.
Yeah, right.
You can find out exactly how much more your living standard would go up by just running this thing and saying, let me consider. Go online, figure out a home and how much it would cost, what the property taxes would be, stick that in, pretend in a separate profile you're living in Tennessee or wherever, and see how much more you get to spend. Because guess what, you may have enough extra money to spend, maybe a fifth of the year in Airbnbs in New York City, enjoying all the pleasantries, but not the bad weather and not the crowds over Christmas.
All right. Well, this is really interesting, and I wasn't sure whether I should get you to talk about this early in our discussion today or at the end, because it seems to me that what you're talking about are things that are within our own control to some extent. What I want to ask you about next are things, macroeconomic movements, things that take place that maybe as voters we have a tiny little say, maybe we don't. But we really can't do too much about the bigger influences in life, the things that happen, whether there's the tax bill gets passed or not is sort of beyond us. We can vote for guys that want it. If we want it, we can vote for people we think will be in line with our preferences. But I want to ask you about this issue of the American financial system, because I know you've been harping about this for a number of years. You've been sounding the alarm bells about it. But, one of the things, Professor Kotlikoff, that people are going to say is, I've heard some people back in the 1990s warning about fiscal doom, and if we don't balance the budget, and if we don't start getting our house in order, blah, 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 blah. And here we are 30 years later, and everything is swimmingly good, at least for people with upper income people anyway.
Yeah, it's, most households, most workers haven't seen a pay raise in real dollars in terms of take-home pay, it's not any higher than it was in the late 1960s. That's
wow.
Average take-home pay according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics in today's dollars. So we've had a lot of wage growth, but it's been targeted towards the lucky few at the top, and so for most Americans are struggling. They're working crazy hours. Both partners are working in couples, and so this is a country that's not growing for the typical worker. It's not performing, and in addition, we have a Social Security system that's got reports in Table 6F1 of its latest trustees report that came out in July, that it's got $34 trillion of debt. And in other words, its unfunded liability is $34 trillion, even including the couple trillion in the trust fund. The system's got all this hidden debt that has been kept off the books for decades. That's massive compared to the $20 trillion in official debt, and the deficit in that system. The increase in the debt was $2 trillion over the last year. Now that's just part. You might say, well, maybe the rest of the fiscal system can bail out Social Security, but the rest of the fiscal system's in far worse shape. The overall fiscal picture is of a debt for our country, a true fiscal gap of $206 trillion. That's my best estimate. Now, that's about 10 times the official debt, about 10 times GDP, and this is net debt. This is, if you look at all the spending that the government has projected to do, including servicing the official debt, the stuff that's put on the books, and you subtract out, and you value that in the present, just present value it, and then you subtract out the present value of all the future receipts, taxes that the government is projected to collect. The difference is $206 trillion. Now,
wow.
And I'm not the only economist who's coming up with these numbers. Alan Auerbach at Berkeley is top economist. Bill Gale at Brookings. They will give you numbers in this range as well. So this is about 10% of GDP on an ongoing basis. The only country that I know that comes close in terms of fiscal gap this big, Russia's got about an 8% of GDP permanent 8% of GDP problem. China may have 5-6% of GDP. So there are a few countries that have that are terribly that have just played this game to the hilt of putting obligations off the books. But we seem to be the masters of our children's demise. We seem to be at fiscal war with our children, at economic war. It's not just the fiscal problems. We're leaving extremely dangerous, damaged climate to our children that could, physically matter dramatically to their lives. I'm at Boston University. I'm as you pointed out, we have one of the top physicists in the world, perhaps the top physicist of all time here is Shelley Glashow. He's the father of the standard theory. It's the main theory of particle physics. I was having a casual conversation with him about a month ago or so about climate change. He tells me off the cuff that he believes that given the current path that the world's on, sea levels will be 100 feet higher in 2200. Now,
Oof.
that's beyond our own lifetimes, but if we think about our grandchildren, they will be alive in 2200, or certainly our great-grandchildren.
Yeah.
So that's the world's most eminent scholar, a physicist. It doesn't get better than Shelley Glashow when it comes to talking about these things. So we have to worry about our children just because they look different from our own children. They may have a different religion, a different background, different skin tone. We are all Americans, and if we don't take care of our children, we're not doing what's socially responsible. What our job is as adults, and our first job is to take care of our kids, and that means not just our own personal kids, but everybody's kids.
Yes,
and we're failing.
Yes. Yes, I thank you for that. I think that's absolutely right and inspiring. I think who can argue with that, Dr. Kotlikoff? So you make it sound as though Russia isn't that much better off, China not that much better off than we are. I guess your numbers, I think, were 10% and 8%, or 8% for Russia compared to our 10% or something like that. But somewhere I was reading that you were suggesting that we're worse off than almost everybody else, at least among the developed countries.
Well, if you look at the developed countries, if you look at the European Union, they put out a fiscal gap measure for every 3 years. Our government has refused to do that, even though something like 20 Nobel laureates and thousands of economists from every top university on down have endorsed fiscal gap accounting. If you go to a website called www.theinformact.org, so it's THEINFORMACT, theinformact.org, you'll see all the endorsements of a bill bipartisan bill that never got passed or hasn't been passed yet, to require our government agencies to start doing fiscal gap accounting, because what they're doing is Enron type accounting. They're keeping almost all the bills off the books. So your Social Security benefit obligations that the government owes you, and Medicare benefits, all those things are not recorded as part of a debt that our kids are going to have to pay. So we're kind of driving in Los Angeles with a map of New York, and we're going to end up driving right into the ocean. That's what's going on. So that's immoral. In addition to everything else we're doing in this war on our children, just hiding from ourselves and hiding from our kids the truth of how we're treating them. Well, I did a fiscal gap analysis for Norway with a Norwegian colleague, back in like '93, and when it was presented to the government, they took it seriously, and they started something called a generational trust fund. It's now one of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world, and it really emanated from that, from what I've been told, from this study that got a lot of attention, because when I went to Norway to deliver the study, I was met at the airport by reporters who immediately took me to the hospital. And I said, well, why do you want to take me to the hospital? I'm feeling fine. They said, well, we want you to present this bill from your study says there's a birth bill to the latest newborn Norwegian. So we go to the hospital, we find a baby is about a couple hours old, and they photograph me handing this bill to this child. And at that time, Norway was basically outspending its oil reserves. So they had a huge surplus, but they weren't taking into account the fact that at the rate of spending, they were going to run out of oil, and then the kids were going to be left, future children were going to be left holding the bag. So they decided, let's take some of this oil wealth, some of the revenues, and put it into a trust fund, invest it abroad, not in Norway, not in some politician's brother's, enterprise. Wow. And let's make sure the kids have something.
So, Dr. Kotlikoff, with just a few minutes left, is this what you think? This is where we need to start. We need to the politicians need to start being honest with the American people. I can't help but forget Jimmy Carter when he tried to be honest with his cardigan sweater many decades ago, suggesting that we keep our homes not as warm as they used to be so that we wouldn't consume so much oil. Didn't serve him very well politically. What's the chances of huh?
Yeah, I think Carter was he's a lovely guy. He's probably the best ex-president. He should have started out as an ex-president, because he wasn't really competent as a president. I'm old enough to have remembered Carter. I don't think much of Reagan, who followed. We've had a series of pretty bad presidents, who have ignored posterity. President Obama was great in many respects, but has left, never dealt with these problems. President Clinton never dealt with these problems. Finding real leadership at the top is no picnic. So I've actually run for president twice. The last time as a write-in candidate, and the press had no interest because I didn't have any real money, even though I was one of 5 people that were legally eligible to become president on election day.
Well, anyway, that's very interesting. Well, I think you're voicing some concerns that I really appreciate you doing so. Just with a couple of minutes left here, you mentioned something that you seem to be favorably disposed to President Trump's tax plan, which is kind of surprising. Could you take just a couple of minutes and tell us what you like about it? And I don't think it's going to be passed, though, is it?
Well, we'll have to see. It's getting a lot of bad press. I think President Trump is a disgrace to himself, his family, and his country, and I would hope he would resign. But I don't think he has the manners to do so.
No.
And he's a disgrace on a daily basis. So I'm in no way a Trump supporter, nor am I a Hillary Clinton supporter. As I said a moment ago, I ran against both these folks, but didn't get anywhere. But economics is not about politics. When I put on my economics hat, I forget politics. I just analyze policies the way a good economist would do that, impartially. And this bill has a lot of things going on, but on balance, it's going to help grow the economy, and it's actually, I think, distributionally relatively fair. It's not going to change the distribution of spending, which is the ultimate bottom line across people, much at all. So it's about as fair as the current system if you do the analysis right. The analysis being done in Washington is totally screwed up, and I'll be posting another column about the distributional effects of this plan at Kotlikoff.net, but people can read what I've written already about the growth impacts. Now, it all sounds like it's coming from somebody who's a pro-Republican who's rah-rah on cutting taxes and getting more revenue. But this is one of the few areas, the business tax reform is one of the few areas where you can actually get a good supply-side response. Just cutting personal taxes per se is not going to grow the economy. It's going to do the opposite in the models that we're running. And the other thing about this plan is it started with actually the business part of the plan was actually developed by a Democrat. And so some aspects of this reform are neither Republican nor Democrat at all, of this particular proposal. And it didn't come from Trump. It's basically came from some good people at the House Ways and Means Committee who actually know something about taxes and were very thoughtful about what to do. And it's gotten worse through time compared to where it was like a year and a half ago, but it's still worth doing in its current form.
All right, we're going to have to leave it go at that, Professor Kotlikoff. You have some wonderful ideas, inspirational ideas even. I want to thank you very much for spending your valuable time sharing those with our listeners, and I hope we can do it again sometime. I really enjoyed this.
Well, my pleasure, really. Anytime. Talk to you every week if you'd like. I enjoy the conversations. And Kotlikoff.net, it lists all the software. We have a whole bunch of different software programs for people getting divorced or just interested in Social Security, but also all my columns are there, Kotlikoff.net.